You're listening to Passing Time, a Detroit Lions podcast. We're one pride and all grit, with a passion for Detroit Lions football. Whether you're between meetings, between classes, sitting in traffic, or just relaxing at home, if you have time to pass, pass it with Passing Time. Detroit Lions Talk.
Welcome back. Episode number 10, Season 2, Brian.
47 overall.
Let's get after it. This is a Detroit Lions podcast. I'm Rob.
I'm Brian.
Never gets old. Never gets old, baby. Hey, we got a fun one today. We are mainly going to dive into the draft.
Yep, and we're going to do a little mock. We're going to see what you guys think and give us our takes as well.
We're gonna mock most of the first round down past the Lions pick, and then we're going to go through a consensus mock drafts of guys who are hanging around just before the Lions pick and just after the Lions pick, and really debate who Brian thinks and who I think the Lions would, be justified to pick. And there's some controversial guys that we've been banging it back and forth on a little bit.
I like it.
Yeah, I like it a lot. We're gonna dig into some of the dirt on the Decker, the Frank saga.
What are the Lions doing, and is it their fault, or should we cast some blame somewhere else?
I don't know if we agree or disagree on all that stuff, but Lions got an insurance blanket safety.
Yep.
We'll talk about that a little bit. But man, this is draft, and this is heavy draft focus from here on out until Thursday the 23rd on the draft.
Let's roll.
So let's get after it. Let's start with the Decker saga real quick. Let's get some of the housekeeping items out of the way.
What's your take, Rob? Okay, so Taylor Decker, kind of the scenario is he after the some of the Brad Holmes interviews and the Dan Campbell interviews comes out, and they're saying that they're going to need a guy regardless if Decker comes back or not. This is before he posts on Instagram that he's ready to run it back with the Detroit Lions. He does so, and then the saga begins. What's your take right there?
My take is the generations today aren't the same as the generations before, right? And I'm not saying Decker's really, really young, but he's definitely not as old as you. And it's just you sign a contract. And then the problem with people signing contracts is they sign contracts, and if they overperform their contracts, they want more money. Mm-hmm. If they underperform their contracts, they want all the money, right? And it's just hey, what's the right answer, and can you have it both ways? So I'm going to err on the side of, Decker, you were playing your poker hand, not knowing if you're going to come back. Played that hand a little bit last year. Was leaning towards coming back last year. This year, played that poker hand. Said, hey, guys, I'm coming back. And the Lions are like, okay, well, here's what we value you at, and we love you. We'll probably take you back, but this is the number you're worth. And the way we set your original contract up is this is how we can manipulate it. Take it or leave it.
And it sounds like he's like, nope, I'm going to leave it. Give me my release, and I'm going to go test that market. And he is still testing that market currently. So I do believe it's an interesting take. I feel like that Taylor kind of pushed that narrative as the messages came out from Brad Holmes and from Dan Campbell saying, hey, we love Taylor, but we're also going to need somebody, right? And so he's like, well, crap, if I sit in this too long, I'm not going to have my spot. And then as he releases that to Instagram, that's when the conversations had to start from the Lions. So then they're saying, hey, man, like you said, we don't value at $21 million. We value more like $8 or $9 million.
It's the whole problem. He releases it to Instagram.
Yep.
It's like, dear diary.
Right.
Here's what I think about myself, diary. What happened to having man-to-man conversations? And we'll talk about Rod and not having man-to-man conversations in the very next bullet point here. But why not go to the Lions and say, hey, I do want to come back. What's your thoughts? What's your plan before we dear diary this up and go to the Instagram?
Well, it sounds like he he's a little hurt now after that whole scenario, that he released that the Lions then didn't have the same type of conversations he was expecting, and he was a little like caught off guard. Like I told him in my exit meeting, I'm going to evaluate this. I'm not going to take a pay cut, things like that. And the Lions, even though they may have listened to that, I don't know if they necessarily agreed with that. So to the Lions' credit, this is a business, and they got to do what's best for that team. And to Taylor's Decker, he's got to get his money where he can get it as best as he can. So
yeah, so you can't blame Taylor Decker, right?
Nope.
And only one side of the story has come out, right?
Right.
The Lions haven't aired the dirty laundry. Taylor Decker could have said, I'm not going to take a pay cut, and the Lions could have been like, hey, behind the scenes, we don't value that, but that has not come out, right? Like,
right.
And Taylor wouldn't release that, and the Lions aren't trying to do. I mean, maybe Rod Wood might, but like the Lions haven't released that information, and to me, this is Taylor Decker being a little bit of a drama king, and it could have played out quite a bit differently if the two parties really went man to man behind the scenes and kind of hashed this out.
You also wonder how much the agent has something to do with this, and the lack of communication between Taylor and Brad Holmes, or Taylor and the Lions, and that agent that gets in the middle of it, giving Taylor some, ultimately bad advice. So
if you're looking at this and you're like, man, the Lions are doing Taylor dirty, right? And you're kind of sitting here up front and you're of that thought, and I don't blame you. Like, it sounds a little bit like that. Sure. Let me fast forward. Let's go into the future. We're 12 months in the future, and Taylor Decker sucked all year, and the Lions did him right and honored his contract. Are we looking at the Lions like the same old Lions organization? They brought this guy back that was just strapped together by duct tape and bolts last year, and he sucked all year, and we had to put Manu over there because we had no cap. We couldn't get a center this year because we didn't have the cap to go out and get a center. Man, we really screwed the pooch because we weren't a winning organization and made winning choices at the beginning of the year.
Right. I mean, and some of the controversy comes in with the Detroit falling in love with their own, and you want to make sure that you can't, in a business like this, fall in love with your own. You got to make hard decisions for what's best for your team, whether that you love these guys or not. And once they move past their prime and they're on their decline, it's time to move on and get younger. And we'll talk about that here shortly. Get younger and more hungry, and try to create this rebirth or resurgence, like Dan Campbell says. So
let me give you an example of two baseball organizations that don't fall in love with their own. Okay?
All right.
The Milwaukee Brewers. They get a guy. They see his contract expiring. They see whatever. They trade him. They get several pieces, a couple pieces, and they are always just living in the wild card or the NL Central chase with a minimal budget because they play that game. Let's go to the AL, the best league in baseball. Let's talk about the Tampa Bay Rays. They'll trade away a David Price whenever they get an opportunity. Yep. They'll stack the farm system. They don't fall in love with these guys. They know they're not going to pay them, and they find a way to compete in a salary cap, in a non-salary cap league.
Yeah,
and they do their best. Like the Lions, I think long term, this is the best decision for the Lions. Does it look bad in the PR right now as your deer diaring on Instagram? Yeah,
and it's the off season, so the writers are looking for things to write, and ultimately this is the dirty laundry that the Lions have to offer. So if you're looking to get clicks, this is what they're pushing out there. And I get it. I love Taylor Decker too. He was one of our own. He was a homegrown guy. He was one of the guys that got us to this point. He went through the trials and tribulations of Matt Patricia and the garbage that produced, and made it to the other side. And I get it. We would all love to see him, ride into the sunset and, hold that trophy over his head in that process. But, this is reality. So,
yeah, I don't know, what kind of analogy you can throw at this, but let's try one out real quick before we move on.
I'm sure you will.
But whatever. So let's just say we have a guy Brian. You got a guy mowing your grass, and he's been mowing your grass for 10 years, right?
I think his name is Noah.
Yeah. and you love this guy, but this guy is getting old, and he used to edge. He used to do everything, And then all of a sudden, like last few years, he's too old to edge. He's too old to do this. You're paying him top dollar, and this new guy comes in and is just like, dude, I'll do all this. I'll edge, and it's going to be a cheaper value for you. Like, are you going to honor the old guy that you're paying a lot of money, or are you going to like be like, all right, maybe it's time for a new long guy?
You know the answer to that. It's a no-brainer, right? It's time to move on. So
let's talk about Frank.
Let's talk about Frank.
Frank Ragnow, similar situation. But a little bit different here. It's airing his dirty laundry through his agent, online, through the media. Lions are trying to recoup some of the money that Frank walked away from. And you put me on the spot last time. How do you feel about laying out the scenario of the Lions are asking for $1.2 million back from their signing bonus because he retired early? How do you feel about this?
Come on, Lions. Like, one, it's keep your mouth shut. Like, Rod Wood, this is not laundry we want to air. If you would just keep it behind closed doors, we wouldn't have to deal with this situation, right? And if that's your business model and you want to pinch those pennies, you have every right to. It's not like you don't have the rights to that money, but at the same time, we're talking about like $1.2 million, which is a fraction of a percent of that salary cap. So really, is that going to be the big difference maker? No, but they've already set precedents with Barry and Kelvin and all the guys, right? Whether it's the big names or it's the small names, they're going to try to recoup, that signing bonus. So,
I mean, we're living in a capitalist society,
sure,
right? Like, did you earn that money or did you not earn that money? And technically, he didn't earn the money. Is there some goodwill? Is there something that should have been associated with it? Could they have come to some kind of mutual agreement behind the scenes? They should have, right? They didn't. They're going to say, like, you didn't earn the money, and, like, what's your argument? Like, you did walk away.
But the weird thing about this is we're not hearing this from Frank Ragnow. He's not the one going on social media and complaining about this. You're hearing this through interviews, and Rod Wood is sharing this type of stuff, right? So this is self-inflicted garbage for the Lions. This is stuff that he's feeding the media and they're running with because, again, what else are they going to run with? So this is not it doesn't sound like a bad blood between Frank Ragnow and the Lions. This is just produced because it's another cheap move by the Detroit Lions that they've seen in the years past. So
Rod, just quiet down.
Just quiet down.
Yeah, like, you're still trying to be relevant in the news cycle on your way out. Whatever. So Lions signed a safety, Chuck Clark.
Love it.
30 years old, be 31 soon. Out of Virginia Tech, played for some prominent organizations, started for prominent organizations, Ravens, Jets, most recently the Steelers. A nice little insurance policy for what we got going on at safety.
Yeah, I like this move. I think that one of our worries going into this offseason was whether Kirby or Brian Branch would be able to hit the ground running come the 2026 season. And we all know that Brian Branch coming off that Achilles is going to be slow, maybe October, maybe November before he comes back. And the question marks with Kirby is still there. This kind of eases those tensions. So
yeah. So that being said, we promise you mock drafts. We promise you Lions draft analysis. So what we're going to do, we don't have the teams on here. At least the teams didn't come through here. So what we're going to do is we're gonna run through the most recent NFL mock draft database on consensus mock drafts, and then after that we are going to talk about the guys that are potentially could fall in the Lions area, or the Lions could, per last few years, surprise us and take guys that really are behind those mock draft boards, but they fell in love with a guy, just to give you a sense of like what's there. And Brian and I will kind of debate and talk about some really best case, worst case scenarios, and we're aligned a little bit, but we come at it. We're also quite different on some levels.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of fun. So we'll quickly bust through this. But Raiders taking Mendoza, Arvell Reese number 2 to the Jets. We got Francis Mauigoa to the Cardinals. Jeremiah Love is going to the Titans. Sonny Styles is going to go to the Giants. Carnell Tate to the Browns. Caleb Downs, we'll talk about him later, to the Commanders. David Bailey to the Saints. Rueben Bain to the Chiefs. Who we got next here? Mansour Delane is going to the Bengals. Mekhi Lemon, controversial guy for you, going to the Miami Dolphins. Jermod McCoy to the Cowboys. Jordan Tyson to the Rams. Also controversial kind of pick. I mean, I know kind of how you feel about that.
I want you to say his name.
The interior offensive lineman Loney is from Penn State, who is a guy that we both like, is a classic Ravens pick. Phil, my boy, Ravens fan, friend of the pod, listen to this. I would say that's a great pick. Akeem Mesidor, a guy that we're kind of talking about in this range, 15th to the Tampa Bay. Omar Cooper, a steady riser to the Jets. A lot of people talking Ty Simpson to the Jets there, so that would be good for the Lions, or a team jumping into the draft before the Jets to take a guy like that. Monroe Freeling, 17, big pick, your Detroit Lions there. Thieneman out of Oregon, safety, is going to the Vikings. Everything I see has that. Kenyon Sadiq, 19th to the Cowboys, or excuse me, 19th to the Panthers. This is a guy I've seen mocked in the top 10. He's all. This is going to be an exciting draft because these guys are all over the board. Avion Terrell to the Cowboys. Kadyn Proctor, another guy the Lions are talking a lot about, to the Chargers. Blake Miller, guy we're talking about a lot as well, to the Eagles. Denzel Boston, wide receiver, going to the Browns.
We missed the Peter Woods. Sorry, Peter Woods to the Chargers.
Peter Woods to the Chargers.
Okay.
I'm looking across table here.
Worries.
Emmanuel McNeil Warren is going to the
Bears.
To the Bears. TJ Parker to the Bills. Lamu to the San Francisco 49ers. Caden McDonald going to the Texans. Colton Hood to the Chiefs. Kevin Concepcion is going to the Miami Dolphins. They really need a KC for all you folks at home. Going to the Dolphins, who need a wide receiver after just getting rid of their whole team. I guess so. Cassius Howell is going to go to the Patriots. Jadarian Price to the Seahawks.
Yep.
So, which would be a really interesting pick because backup running back at Notre Dame going in the first round. That running backs don't go in the first round. Right. Backup running backs definitely don't go in the first round. So,
and that leaves us. There's a few guys that probably within that top 32 that didn't get picked in this particular one was Spencer Fanu from Utah, Kendrick Falk from Auburn, and then Ty Simpson, the quarterback from Alabama. Some guys that we could be that brink. First round picks. Do they fall into the second round? Do they fit somewhere even higher? Offensive tackles, those edges and that quarterback, which are premier positions in that first round. So
when I'm spending quality time with my family, as some coaches in the South will say, my family, or some former fired coaches in the South, I'm putting up mock drafts. I'm just watching them. And the crazy thing is how different they all are. Yeah. So we're talking a consensus one here, but man, there's no consensus yet. And maybe it'll get tighter as we get closer to the draft. But like right now,
I mean, I feel like your number one overall pick might be pretty locked in, but from then forward, it's like, where is Sonny Styles going to go as a linebacker? Where is your first offensive tackle going to go? Is it going to be edge? Is Bain going to be one of your first edges off the board? Or are we going to see guys like Caleb Downs, be in that top 5?
So we've seen some guys fall, right?
Yep.
And historically, we talked. You just mentioned Caleb Downs. Remember a guy named Kyle Hamilton being a highly regarded draft pick and falling. And of course, Phil. Of course, the Ravens are just sitting there waiting, not trading up, just saying like, "Oh yeah, we'll take a perennial All-Pro." The back end of the first round that y'all didn't want. Brian's got thoughts on taking safeties above premier players, so we'll talk about that. But let's talk about guys' pipe dreams that we'll call it you got to run in the card, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys that could fall based on some scenarios in different mock drafts, and kind of thoughts on, run the card in guys. We're and I don't think the Lions are patient enough to do a lot of that. When they got a guy close, they don't run the card in. They go trade up a pick or two just to make sure they get the guy, which I appreciate that.
For sure.
Because you don't want to get sniped.
Yep. And
right?
I would say that there's a few guys that on my board are hitting that run the card in. It's moving up a couple spots in order to get, and they're at two positions of major need, and that's tackle or edge. And
is that it? Is that you're only running the card for?
Those are my two major positions. Those are my two run the card in. Those are my two. If they're there, if we're sniffing them, we're going to get them.
Okay. So. All right. So we'll talk about a couple run the card in guys.
All right. David Bailey is that edge out of Texas Tech. I like him a lot. I like Rueben Bain. Oh, man, his bend just impresses me. I think that he is a pretty perfect complement to a guy like in Hutchinson, who I think those two together really combines that power. It combines that bend. It combines that ability to stop the run. Those are 3 down guys, if not more, that could alleviate your woes at corner. It could alleviate your woes at linebacker. It could alleviate your woes at the depth at that edge position. So
no doubt. So David Bailey, out of Texas Tech, but like in the era of the transfer portal, like he's out of Stanford.
Yeah,
a highly intelligent guy. Stanford, had him. He played well at Stanford, but they were able to double and triple team him at Stanford. Texas Tech realized that they're spending. And NIL is second to none basically in college football to try to be competitive, which they're very successful. And he looks great. The comp we got is Brian Burns, which would be absolutely incredible.
And
run the card in. To your point,
run the card in.
Rueben Bain, maybe a little bit less of the athlete, but more of a get it done consistently guy against the highest competition.
And again, that a little bit more of a compliment to a guy like Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah. Yeah, Bailey is a guy that's going to set the edge less, but get to the quarterback more. Rueben Bain's going to be a guy that sets the edge more and potentially gets to the quarterback just as much. Right. And it's got maybe that frame, that Dan Campbell, dreamsicle that you might see out there. So what about at tackle? Is there any run up the card guys that fall?
Francis Mauigoa is one of those guys. Mauigoa, sorry.
Yeah,
is
right.
One of those guys that you look at that comes in, starts day one. You can put him on opposite side of Penei Sewell, and you don't have any worries.
Yeah, forget about it. The guy falls. And there's a few offensive tackles. And I was watching Yates and Kuiper talk. And, whatever you think about Kuiper, whatever you think about Yates. But I thought the one interesting thing that they broke down is like teams that could take offensive tackle. And it's very limited. There's a lot of teams up there that have heavy investment in offensive tackle already. So they just talked about there's 3 teams before the Lions that actually have a large need of offensive tackle without being invested in both sides. They're like, these are the 3 teams that really could take off offensive tackle. They also have other needs, right? So there are 3 tackles, right? So some of these guys are going to fall into the Lions' lap.
And there's a good class of that tackle, and having a Penei Sewell gives us the flexibility of whether that's left or right, and we can come in and swoop up one of those guys, whether that's first round or, there's some debate right now, whether that should be first round or second round, but it's got to be one of those first 2.
All right. So let me give you a name.
Okay.
That is I think, a run the card in name. And the name is Caleb Downs from Ohio State, who's been all over the board, Brian. This guy is a lot like Kyle Hamilton, where, friend of the pod, T-Rob, great second part of the name.
Hey, T-Rob, is he going to be available at 17?
No. T-Rob says no. If he is available, just like Kyle Hamilton, we're sitting down in this stinking basement. and betting dollar bills that Kyle. I mean, I bet T-Rob lost a lot of dollar bills, put it on Kyle Hamilton going to the draft. So let's just say Caleb Downs falls because, Brian, you had a great counter argument to just take the names out of it, talk safety, tackle, edge, just pure argument on hit and missing.
And you're gonna hear Brad Holmes not care about positional value, but the reality is when I can swoop a edge or a offensive tackle, specifically left tackle, in that first round for 5 years and have him under a rookie contract, to me that is way more valuable than a safety at that same position at that same 5-year value.
Yeah, it goes basically that rookie contract value goes quarterback, edge, tackle.
Yeah.
And then you talk about gaps. There's a significant gap.
Significant gap. You go wide receiver, you can argue D tackle, and then you can get into the other positions, linebacker or safety or corner, and safety's not on the top. So
yeah, you're right. But also, you can swing in the first round and miss on offensive linemen as well. And the Lions had like Laken Tomlinson wasn't a big hit. Obviously an interior guy, but if you're taking, let's just say they're in the same draft, if you got a Caleb Downs sitting there, and you're taking Laken, and you're missing on it, and you passed on Caleb Downs, who's going to be a perennial All-Pro, to try to take positional value to hit on contracts in the draft, you're kind of like you're jumping the shark a little bit, right? Like you're trying to outthink yourself, and people have accused Brad of getting too cute.
Sure, you can and you can see that Brad Holmes is going to take his guy if he has a higher evaluation on Caleb Downs and he's sitting there at 17, he's going to run the card in, right? I mean that's just what Brad Holmes does. He doesn't care who he has in the position already. He doesn't care about positions of need. He's going to go for the football players that fit his team and his mold, and guys that love football and have the grit index and all of the Lions check marks. So if Caleb Downs checks those marks, he's going to run that card in.
When I was growing up, Brian, there was only 2 swear words in my house, and they both started with an S, and one of them wasn't shit. Okay, my dad said you could say all the words, use it in context, don't use it in front of your teachers or at church, but you do not use shut up. And you do not use sure. It's the most passive-aggressive BS word ever. And when you're assuring me over there, you used that perfectly. My dad would have taken his old leather belt off and pulled your pants down and and done what he did. And it was hitting you with the belt. All right. So Caleb Downs sitting there with offensive tackles on the board.
Yeah.
Are you running the card in?
I'm going to ask you, which of those offensive tackles are still on the board? Because the reality is that right now at 17, in my opinion, if there's a run on offensive tackles, if your top 3 or 4 offensive tackles come off the board, then I'm going to tell you one of your edges is still going to be there. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to also say that if one of your edges is there, there's a positional value at one of those edges that I'm going to say is probably overshadows Caleb Downs. Now, if there's a run on offensive tackles and a run on edges, and Caleb Downs is sitting there, then yeah, you swoop him up. I'm going to say there's going to be a gap between talent of Caleb Downs and your second tier tackle and your second tier edge. So absolutely, you grab that guy.
So, I mean, as Lions fans, and I think next week will be a really good rooting interest, what we want. But we really want somebody to draft Ty Simpson before that 17th pick. We really want, for sure, 3 wide receivers to go before that 17th pick. There's 3 guys that are highly talked about. 1 running back that's highly talked about. You throw in 2 quarterbacks, that's 6 picks. There's potentially a couple more wide receivers and a tight end that could go before that 17th pick. And you're pushing a tremendous amount of talent down that board, putting the Lions in a very interesting situation where they, you could even do reverse Lions and say, you know what, there's 3 or 4 guys on the board, and maybe somebody wants to move up and help us procure some of those picks that we traded away in the past.
So, I mean, and the tricky thing is you haven't seen Brad Holmes do a ton of moving back in the draft. You've seen a ton of aggression. You see a lot of move forward and get his guys, whatever the cost might be. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see more of that moving up in that first round in order to secure the guy that he loves, the guy that he's fallen in love with, whether that's through the pro days or through the combine or what he saw on tape. So
yeah, Brad's not a guy that says sure, right? Like he goes and gets his. All right, so let's talk about kind of the tier 2. So that was tier 1. Run the card in. Probably guys that are not available, right? We're not like trying to be unrealistic about this draft. Like that first part was like, all right, these guys are probably going to be gone. They'd be pipe dreams to follow the Lions. This area is more of a sweet spot. These are guys that probably are going to be around or potentially be around. And do you want to talk about a few of your sweet spot picks? And you have some edges and some tackles right here in the sweet spot.
Right there at that sweet spot. The Kendrick Falks, which I love. I like Kendrick Falk a lot. Keldrick Falk. I like Keldrick Falk a lot. I do think that he is a fit for the Detroit Lions. I think that, again, maybe not the upside of a Rueben Bain, but at the same time, he does fit the need, a run stopper, strong edge setter, maybe not as high of an upside in that pass rush, but again, a guy that's going to be able to play those first 2 rundowns at a high level.
You got a good comp on him? Like a
Rashawn Gary seems like a good comp. I think that he is a complement. Maybe not necessarily your premier guy. He's not going to be your, he's not going to be your Trey Hendrickson. He's not going to be your Hutch. He's not going to be your Micah Parsons. But he's going to be a good complement to one of those guys.
Gary got a big second contract, right? And is still coveted. So
I love Monroe Freeling, offensive tackle coming out of Georgia. I do think that he is one of those guys that could come in, has a high upside, that could come in, learn the position in training camp, probably have some ups and downs as it goes early in the season, but by the end of the season could be a pretty perennial guy to fit that role. Kadyn Proctor scares me a little bit. He's a big dude, really athletic. I think he has a really high upside, but I think right now he's got some development to do, and how quickly can we develop him into a need. And I know we got Larry Borum in order to fill that gap, but I just question how quickly a Kadyn Proctor can jump into that role and be effective. I like TJ Parker. I think that he is not as exciting to me, but again, pretty solid pick. So
yeah. Guy that can get off the quarterback, a little bit less of an edge setter, a little bit more of a you got 2 guys just feasting on quarterbacks, which is just shown to create problems. It makes your secondary look a lot better, right? Mm-hmm. Spencer Fanu also in that area where potentially it's just like, it's a sweet spot. Kind of a sneaky Brad Holmes-esque pick.
Yeah, for sure. I think Spencer Fanu is another one of those guys that if he's sitting there at 17, can you trade back and still kind of to pick him up and also get some capital along those lines? That would be one of those guys I would love at like a 23. That kind of that range. So
all right. So here's some Lions-esque picks that are getting mocked slightly behind the Lions that have what we think is a lot of upside, and guys that we should probably just mention because they're getting mocked behind the Lions, but they are relatively position of need and guys that like could jump up the board, as we get a little bit closer to the draft. So what are some like Lions type back half value guys that we should kind of know about and have our we should tell our friends to be smart about?
Blake Miller coming out of Clemson is one of those guys that I really believe Brad Holmes might fall in love with, and just looks like a solid, gritty, like starter, loves football. He probably interviews well and could come in and just play the game, right? He is one of those guys that might surprise us that they take him as early as 17, but Brad Holmes might take him as early as 17. So
yeah, I mean Brad Holmes might take him at 15.
Right, exactly.
To go get his guy.
He might trade 3 third rounds in order to. Oh, he doesn't have those. Yeah. Okay, never mind.
We love you, Isaac Tesla. All right.
Yep.
Anybody else there? In that?
Zion Young, the edge out of Missouri. Again, another one of those guys that I feel like might fall more into that second round. And if you pull him early, that might be a stretch. It might be we might be jumping the gun a little bit, but another one of those guys that you question if Brad Holmes might fall in love with. So.
Supreme athlete, super raw, Ezekiel Anza, like just a guy that like could have unlimited ceiling. Also could James Pierce. I don't know, like a guy that like you fall in love with and doesn't make a great impact. Yep. There's also guys on the board that like. Mansour Delane, the cornerback out of Virginia Tech, LSU, like game wrecker out there. Like those guys are going to be in that range, maybe slightly before, slightly after. But if they're there, Gerard McCoy out of Tennessee, just a big, strong athlete out there on the edge. Everything that we thought, Enos Rakestraw could dream to be, could be sitting there and would really solve some issues.
It would definitely solve some issues, and I see the value there, but that would also mean that Brad Holmes would have to swallow his pride and then say, I failed in that 2023 draft, and Terrion Arnold isn't as good as we thought he was, and Enos Rakestraw is not the guy.
Yeah.
He's just so that's I think it might be too early right now for Brad Holmes and crew to swallow that pill. So.
Tell us what you think the Lions, based on your analysts, what you think, what mock drafts you like that you would love the Lions to take. Right now, I think, going into this draft, I just think this is going to be one of the more fun drafts to watch because it's all over the board. Sure. And I would expect some chaos here. I think there's going to be some trading.
100%. I honestly think that, after that first pick, you don't know what's going to necessarily happen, and ultimately, you don't really know what the Lions are going to do. So
you don't know what the Lions are going to do, and we are discounting the fact that like people, like franchises, live and breathe on the quarterback position, and we got one quarterback really mocked as a for sure first rounder. Yeah. We're sitting in previous drafts, and quarterbacks get reached for all the time. So, like. Is it impossible to see like somebody trading up to get Ty Simpson at like top 10, like, or like they need to get in front of the Jets or second pick for the? There's a lot of possibilities out there. And it's gonna be a lot of fun to watch.
A lot of possibilities. Yep. So
and is there a quarterback out there that like isn't even being mocked in the first round that like people are gonna start falling in love with? Like Cade Klubnik. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that preseason were mock drafters' favorites, right? And now they're falling down the boards.
And now this is the season. The next few weeks, you're going to start to see, those types of stories come out, and everybody's going to want to try to improve their value, right? So the pro days are going to come out. They're going to be televised. You're going to see a tons of stuff on Instagram, on TikTok, on Twitter or X. You're going to see these guys start to rise and try to improve their stock. So
yeah, no doubt about that. So maybe last segment, let's talk about the owners' meetings. Really, Dan Campbell got in front of the microphone, Brian.
Yep.
And anytime Dan Campbell gets in front of the microphone, it's pretty entertaining. It's must listen. He's just, you gravitate towards Dan. There's not a lot of people that are like Dan out there, and he's genuine, and he tells it the way it is, and he doesn't hide a ton. And love to listen to the guy. So, what are some of the bullet points? What are some of the pieces that you can pull away from Dan Campbell's interview? Well, Dan's got moxie, and I think that, like, broadly, I would say like he's pissed off from last year, and he feels like he got a little bit bamboozled, and he expected something to happen, and he got a whole different result. Mm-hmm. And he's like, "We're burning the boats." He's like, it doesn't matter. I'm reinvigorated, and I'm ready to say, you know what? I'm ready to own the failures from last year, and I think that's kind of Dan's words. And I apologize to you guys, you as fans. And this year, we're doing things differently, and I'm re-energized. I'm reinvigorated, and I don't care about buddy old contracts. We're gonna get younger. We're gonna get hungry guys. We're gonna get guys in here, and we're gonna reinvigorate the organization.
And that's kind of good to hear, too, right? I mean, as much as I would have loved to have Alex Anzalone back, because I think that he's a really good player, you saw some of the controversy that came into last season with his, holdout or injury or wanted more money or his value of himself. You even saw a little bit of this with David Montgomery throughout the year, and, we didn't feed him the ball. We didn't give him nearly the touches that I think he deserved. But at the same time, in some of those interviews, whether it's on the St. Brown podcast or what have you, you saw that he was a little bit about me, right? And about my touches and my scores and things like that. So, he's finding guys that are younger, hungrier, love football. I don't know about the talent level necessarily in comparison yet. And we'll figure this out once season starts and training camp starts. But this is a good shift. I do believe that.
I mean, when Dan came in, he had that fire, right? And then, I think in his eyes, like, he had that fire they're building, and he didn't have to. He thought he was building the flame intra-organization, and he thought maybe he didn't have to be the fire. And now he's like, you know what? I'm going back to being the fire here,
right?
And I'm going to make sure that people around me understand the urgency to win, right? And the Lions, they need to have that urgency. That window is here, and it's here now. And he doesn't want it to be on him, right? Yeah. He wants to say, I've had as many Starbucks triple mocha latte with 4 extra shots to fire y'all up. Like, this isn't on me. If you guys don't want it, this is on you. And also, I'm going to weed a few of you out that I know you're not burning the boats with me, and you're here to get paid, and you want maximum money, and you want maximum selfish opportunities. You're out of here, because we're going to roll this boat together, and I'm going to be the lead coxswain.
And I love that about Dan. I think he tells the way it is, and that's absolutely right. He wants a rebirth. He wants a reset of what he was going into in 2023, and he's going to kind of wipe the slate clean and start pushing towards that ultimate goal. And I'm interested. I'm intrigued. I'm concerned roster-wise with some of the holes. I think that's going to play itself out. But I have no doubt in Dan. I think that he is a amazing coach, an amazing leader of men, and he's going to get back to biting kneecaps.
So, and Dan also says, I think Rod Wood should talk to Dan about how you talk in public, because all he says is he almost says things about the Taylor Decker situation without saying it. He's like, I'm going to call him, and I'm going to call him on my time. I'm going to talk to Taylor on my time. And it hasn't happened, and it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen, which tells you, hey, there's a little bit of controversy in here. Yeah. But, I appreciate Taylor for everything he did for Detroit. He was an awesome player for this city. He did a lot for a lot of years, and, that's it. No, nothing bad.
Right. And he does it so well while still caring about the guy, but understanding this is a business.
Yeah.
Right? And you can still do both.
Yeah, and the one thing I think that he's also talking about is just kind of he's switching over the leadership to some of these guys that have born and bred from him and Brad's draft picks, and he's like, they had to go out and get an Alex Anzalone, right? Yeah. Who had winning culture, winning pedigree, understood what Dan wanted, what other winning organizations, Sean Payton wanted, brought him in here to kind of teach these guys. Now, I think he feels like he's got those guys, and they've been homegrown, home harvested here, and it's passing the torch to those guys, right? Yep.
It's the Amon-Ras, it's the J-Mos, it's the Jared Goffs, it's the
Jack
Campbells, it's the really, the Aiden Hutchinsons, the the Aleem McNeils, the guys that have been there now, that are going to grow into this and push everybody else and saying, hey, you either get behind me and you're close and following, or we're going to leave you behind.
Also, it's my pet peeve to be like, it's the Aiden Hutchinsons, plural. But I did it too. So I don't know if you don't care, but I always like hear that, and I'm like, oh, I don't like that situation. The only other thing that I remember taking away from it is like how we've heard for the last few years that joint practices were great and they loved it and they got so much out of it, and now it's like, nah,
counterproductive.
Last year sucked.
Yeah.
And I felt like I gave more than we received. We're taking these things back. We're going to do it ourselves. We need more developmental time.
We might see these guys starters in the preseason now. So.
Yeah, so
let's see.
Could be some different things going on. But I think, this was a broad week of a little bit of news, a little bit of Dan news, signing, some tea in the drama out in the news segment. But next week, I really want to start really focusing on like some prospects, Brian. I want to talk about some traits, really like give everybody some idea of like not necessarily our scouting reports, but like a conglomerate scouting report on a lot of these guys. Right. Get a little bit of your take and really start honing in on a few guys that we should really be rooting for or against the Lions to pick in the draft.
I love that. And let's look at beyond that first round. Let's look at the number 50, or where are we going to sit with that? Some of the guys that are available there, and then beyond. Maybe we can look at even in that fourth round what we're going to see the Lions kind of, some of the needs, some of the guys that we know have that grit index, and some of the guys that might be coming off the page a little bit.
Yeah, second round. I mean, we should evaluate the third round. The Lions will go get a third round pick if they need to. They're not against that, and heck, they could trade back. And maybe Brad's kind of like, hey, you guys think you know me. Maybe he's an OG and he wants to do something different, But
all right.
A lot of things going on, and we just want to be prepared for it. We want you to be informed heading into the draft, and we want to have some fun with it.
Love it.
Bill's on vacation. Bill, when you get done drinking out of your coconut, chime in next week. We're disappointed this week. Lalone on the pod. We need you next week. Here's your insight. Guy said that he didn't have enough time to prepare. B Mikes, we're going to crush it next week. I think this is going to be a really fun getting into draft mode. And on a lookout here, we are going to go live, and we're going to do a little hangout session in the draft.
Let's do it.
And we're going to have a lot of fun with that. Do we know how to go live?
We're going to figure that out.
Okay, we're going to figure that out.
Technology is our friend.
Yeah, you're our tech guy. Yeah, we have a 44-year-old,
which is scary,
tech guy that still plays VCRs at his house. So bear with us a little bit, friends. Anything else you want to say?
Hey, just make sure you check us out on all the socials and like and subscribe.
Let's go. Stay gritty. Go Lions. See you next week.